My friends and I may be podcasters, but if we succeed, we will be remembered as legends of DC.
Look up in the sky.
It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's
The Krypton Report. Welcome to the Krypton Report. I am your host, Tyler, and here we talk about all things Kryptonian, the Supergirl TV series, anything from sci-fi to comics, anything with Superman and Supergirl. The Krypton Report is part of the Southgate Media Group's Legends of DC podcast, which you can find us on Facebook at Krypton Report, Twitter at Krypton Report, KryptonReportPod@gmail.com, and then you can find us at SouthgateMediaGroup.com. Also, you can find me, Tyler, at JTY Patrick on Twitter, as well as my lovely co-host and wife, Jania, at Jania Patrick on Twitter. On iTunes, and we ask that you please leave us a review if you can. Send us any feedback, let us know how we're doing, because we would love to work with you, and let us know how we're doing. Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Krypton Report. I am your host, Tyler, and today I have a very special guest I'm really excited to talk with. This special guest is a fellow podcaster. His podcast is amazing. It's one that I discovered when I was searching for something to listen to, and he actually records here near me because I'm based right outside Columbus. He is based in Columbus. I'd like to welcome Mr. Joe Stuber. Hi, Joe.
Hey. Hey, how are you doing? Thanks for having me on the show today.
Oh, I'm excited. Joe does the podcast Comic Book Central, and if you, of course you are, if you're listening to this, are a comic book nerd, he talks to the actors, producers, people that are all part of the comic book world, artists, filmmakers. I mean, it's my favorite podcast to listen to, and I wait for a new episode. Recently, he did an episode with the legendary director Richard Donner, and that was one that I listened to.
Yeah, that was fun.
I was watching my phone waiting for it to drop.
You and me both.
I was like, okay.
That was a long time coming on that one. Yeah, that was a lot of persistence and perseverance. So many other things went into that one. But yeah, it was. I launched the podcast, 2013? And I think I even mentioned this on the show because people always say, who's your dream guest or who do you want on? You don't want to say it because if it doesn't happen, then you're like, well, that was disappointing. And then you just don't want to tip your hand until you've done podcasting enough, until you actually have recorded a show, it's sitting on your hard drive, it's ready to go. You just have no confidence in it at all. And then, until I had that. But, yeah, that was a long time coming for that. So, but thank you for the kind words about the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. I started listening to your show. I moved back to Ohio, and I was driving around a lot looking for a new job, and I found it, and it was just – I think the first one I listened to might have been the Ilya Salkind.
Oh yeah, going back to the beginning. Yeah, that was like episode 2 or 3, I think. Yeah, right when we started. So, yeah, he was and what you got was the director's cut. If you talk about the Donner cut, this was the Stuber cut. We talked. I forget how long that episode was. It was probably like maybe an hour and a half, hour and 45 or something. But there's probably like another hour worth of audio with Ilya that's out there. He just has so many stories. He's a fountain of knowledge. But
I believe it. Like I've slowly been rewatching Superboy season 2. I've decided to break down and just buy it on iTunes because I've wanted to watch it. And of course, that was produced by the Salkinds too. Mm-hmm. So I could just see where you could just talk for hours, but. Just Superman related. I'm going to try to remember all the guests that you have had.
Oh wow, they have fun with that. I don't even know if I can do it. Yeah, well, Superman's my favorite character, so people should know that.
Yes.
Indiana Jones, my favorite. Like realistic character, movie character, original character, but comic book character. It's Superman. I mean, it begins and ends there. I mean, this is getting better. Right. So I'm always up for Superman themed episodes, especially Superman the movie, because that that to me is the gold standard, was the gold standard, will always be the gold standard. It's the movie that made me believe a man could fly. I watch it now. I still believe Christopher Reeve flew. I don't care about special effects. He flew. I don't know how he did it, but he flew. It makes me believe that. And so anytime I get a chance to go into that world and talk to people who inhabited that world for any length of time, I'm going to take advantage of it. So you're always going to hear Superman-themed conversations on Comic Book Central. Which
is how, and one of the reasons why I invited you, A, on this show, and B, I listened to your show so closely. Let's see. Let's run down some of the highlights we can. We had, starting with Superman, we had Mark McClure, it was Jimmy Olsen, Mr. Salkind, we discussed him, the producer of the films.
Mm-hmm.
We had,
and we should say, I mean, he's the guy that he's the guy. I mean, he gets hammered so many times, and we'll talk about this as we get into the movie and things like that. But when you think about it, he's the guy that came up with the money, him and his dad. Yeah. So if they don't get the money to make the film and get Marlon Brando and get Gene Hackman to sign up, we don't have Superman the movie. So Ilya Salkind. Love that interview. But yeah, go ahead. Jeff E. Yeah, Jeff E.'s young Clark Kent. That was fun.
And then, so that's super. And then you had Sarah Douglas. No, you had Sarah Douglas, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. She was great. I mean, she, again, another one, just story after story after story. She's fun.
And then
she's fun.
Why am I blanking on it? Jack O'Halloran?
Jack O'Halloran. Yeah, so you got the two Kryptonian villains. Still one short. Look, just stay tuned. Again, you talk about persistence and perseverance. Terrence Stamp has yet to be on the show, but I got two of the three Kryptonian villains. We chatted with them, and Jack was funny, man. He was a boxer back in the day and told so many. I mean, that's the thing I love is just not talking about the Superman stuff, but going into like their past life and how they got started and things they did early. So yeah, he was another great one.
And then we'll leave the name dropping there. But, if you're also a big fan of Smallville, like I am, he's talked with so much of the cast that it's awesome. But it's like I said, his show. If you haven't heard it, you need to check it out.
No, you're very kind. I thank you for that. It's fun. Yeah, like I love talking. So I love talking to people who love comic books. So.
And I do too. So today's topic is one that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and I've hit on it little bits on the show, but I wanted to find the right guest to discuss this, and I thought Joe was just the perfect person to have on here to discuss this. We're going to talk about Superman 2. And for some people may or may not know this, but Superman 2 has two different distinctive cuts. And what happened was when they were making Superman 1, they were filming Superman 1 and 2 back to back. They had to stop, finish Superman 1 for release because the money was getting tight, and then they were going to go back. But during that post-production, for lack of a better term, Richard Donner, the director, was let go, and the Salkinds brought in Richard Lester to finish. So Lester, because of the Director's Code and the Motion Picture Association, you have to shoot so much of a movie to have credit, reshot, added some new scenes to what Donner had already cut and shot for Superman 2, and that's what was released in theaters. And back in 2006, during the time of the release of Superman Returns, Donner reacquired a lot of his footage and was able to assemble closer to his vision of what the film was and release that. So we're going to discuss the two movies, the best, worst, which one you prefer, and what that means to us.
Yeah, and I think too, you think about, the two cuts proper. Obviously the film released version back in '81, and like you mentioned, the Donner cut, which got an official DVD Blu-ray release. So that is a proper cut. But man, you even think about like the ABC version. And again, there's a lot of people out there more knowledgeable about the different cuts than the two of us. But you think about the ABC version when it was released on the ABC network back in the day. There was all that extra footage, like, deleted scenes that were thrown in. So you had like sort of that cut. I don't know if it was like the international cut or however they referred to it, because I know there's a cut of Superman the movie like that as well. But yeah, so there's like a bunch of different cuts. There's so much footage out there of this film. You're talking about two directors directing 2 films. When you're coming into it, like you mentioned, I think, what is it, like 60% or something like that Lester had to do. So you're going back in and reshooting, which I always thought was kind of strange that they didn't get like a co-director credit. And again, I know there's a financial and a legal aspect involved, and you get into with the Salkinds, and back in the day, there's whole issues. But I always thought that they should have. There was so much Donner footage in the proper film, the feature that was released. I think they should have had a co-director title in that. But whatever. It is what it is.
I agree with that, because if I remember correctly, one thing to really help solidify what Donner did was every scene with Gene Hackman was shot under Donner, because they only had Hackman for so long, so they couldn't bring him back for the reshoots. Right. And I mean, if I watched,
they could have if they had paid him.
Yeah, if they had paid. Oh yeah.
And that was the point. It all comes down to money. I'm sure if Hackman would have been cut a check, I'm sure he would have come back. Well, maybe, I don't know. Who knows the relationship he had with the Salkinds, but But yeah, that was the thing. Anytime you see Gene Hackman in that movie, that's Donner, because they shot all that when they were shooting part 1, and then I think even Jack O'Halloran had mentioned that they had gone over Hackman's schedule, so they actually paid him overtime, and penalties to shoot. So what they got from him was like even over and above what he agreed to. But yeah, he was not coming back for the reshoot. So yeah, again, if Donner had been on 2, he probably would have come back. So again, there's just so many different things that happened that caused people to not come back or not do something for the film.
So I will say that as a youngster, this is one of those films that I watched a lot with Superman the movie, that I couldn't remember which parts were in what film.
Okay, so you're watching them on like home video?
Home video,
okay.
And when they were on TV, back in the day when sometimes you would record from TV because they didn't have
so you got your
releases.
tapes. Yeah, so you're watching them both at the same time.
So, for the longest time, it was one of those films like I couldn't remember until they had their proper releases what was in what film, because I always remembered, at the beginning of Superman, it shows them, and then later he fights them in the street. Because it's one of those, like, you just put one in, and then you're like, well, I got to keep watching. And you weren't aware that you started the second film. So it was always one of those, like, man, I just looked at it as one giant thing. And as a kid, sometimes it's on in the background, you're playing, you're not keeping track of time, you're watching. And then as you grow up, you start to notice, hey, wait a minute. And now you watch, like, okay, I can see things differently.
Well, and it's strange you say that too, because you're watching it from that perspective, but really that was the intent of the 2 films, was that Superman, depending on how much your listeners know, but the backstory, like you said, they had to go back and finish 1 because they were running out of money. We need at least a finished movie, so they end up taking the ending. The spinning the world backwards and going back through time. That was the ending of 2, the original ending of 2. They stole that. They're like, we need an ending, so let's put it on 1 and just get that out and get it released. But 1 was supposed to be a cliffhanger. 1 was supposed to, the movie ends. He flings the XK-101 missile off into space, and that missile is what cracks open the Phantom Zone, releasing the villains, which you're left with a cliffhanger at the end of part 1 and come back. Because you see at the titles when 1 ends, depending on which version you're watching, it'll say coming next year, Superman 2, which would have been 1979. It would have been released in 1979 because the intent was, we've got this movie in the can. It's coming out. It's already mostly shot. We're just going to go do a few things and then give you the ending of this movie. And then they were like, well, we got to finish it. So then it became 2. So it's interesting you say that, it's like, well, I watched 1 right into the other. That's the way it was supposed to be. But, history being what it is, it didn't end up that way, and finances being what they were.
No, we're going to take a quick pause on that thought because I want to jump back. But how do you feel about when they take a story of a film series, especially like the latter, and they decide to make them back to back? And like examples, when they did Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3, and The Matrix 2 and 3, they shot them back to back and made it one story. like how do you feel as far as like the movie trilogy or a movie set goes when they do that? Like this one's different where they were trying to do it for the first two installments. But like,
I mean, if the script's good, I mean, you can do whatever you want. Because to me, look, I've always said, whether it's television, movies, theater, whatever, if you make me care about the characters, if I'm emotionally invested in the characters in the film, you can do whatever you want with them, and I'll follow you to the ends of the earth. But if you lose me, if the characters aren't well developed, if they're cardboard, you're going to lose me no matter what. So if the script's good, and again, you're going back to Tom Mankiewicz and Richard Donner and working on the script from initially Mara Puzo and the Newmans, they developed the characters. They developed the love story between Lois and Clark, or Lois and Superman, or the Lois, Clark, and Superman. They made us care about those characters. So however you do it is fine with me. They did that on Back to the Future as well. And sometimes it's just economics. For Back to the Future, you weren't going to get Michael J. Fox and all their schedules lined up. So get them while you got them. And that was what they presented to the executives was, look, if we spend this little bit of extra money, we can get 2 movies out of it, which is always going to work economically, because if somebody thinks, hey, we can get more bang for our buck here. Don't forget, this goes back to the Salkinds producing the 3 Musketeers and the 4 Musketeers.
Yep.
Their original movie but that was where, because I think it's now the Salkind law that they put into effect, where they were shooting what they knew to be 2 movies, but the cast and crew were only signed for 1. They had only agreed to 1. And so it came out and they shot this huge movie and split it into 2. Well, now after that happened, it's like, no. If you're shooting 2 movies, we get paid for 2 movies. You have to, and that's why, the whole thing about Brando coming back and, for 2, they would have to pay him. Gene Hackman coming back for 2, they had to pay him. So you get into that, which is what they did on Superman. They were shooting 2 movies, and everybody knew they were shooting 2 movies, but they just ran out of money, 2/3 of the way through the second one. But look, if it works, it works, because you get 2 movies back to back. You don't have to wait that long between them, which would have been really cool. But, it depends on the chaos that's involved with it. And, in this instance, I think it worked. I think Superman 2 is an amazing film. Like, I saw it in the theaters when I was a kid. So, I did know it was 2 different movies because I had to wait a few years before I saw it. But I, as a kid, I didn't notice anything at the time. Every now and again, you're like, boy, Margot Kidder's hair looks a little different in this shot.
Yeah.
And years later, you figure out why, because you shot it 2 years later. But
there's little things you pick up. Like, I watched both cuts back to back one night because I couldn't sleep and my wife was passed out. So I was like, well, everybody's asleep. Might as well keep watching.
So this is the Superman 2 and the Richard Donner cut you watch back to back?
Yes.
Yeah. That's fun to do. I've done that as well.
It is fun because it keeps what's fresh in your mind, so you can really compare. Now, we'll take into like you were talking about, the Richard Donner cut starts with, if you watch it, it starts weird because it starts with more of the ending that should have been Superman 1. It starts with like him stopping the missiles, tossing them into space, and when the missile explodes, it breaks them out of the Phantom Zone, and you see Zod yell "free" and flies to Earth, which was supposed to be the original ending of Superman 1.
Correct.
And then the credits come on, and that's kind of like, okay, now we're officially getting into Superman 2.
Yeah.
And in the Donner cut, we go back to the big, blue lettering John Williams theme, orchestrated intro. As with the Lester cut, we get a flashback title crawl with different font, reorchestration of the music for Superman.
Yeah,
2.
Williams wasn't available. Yeah, he wasn't available at the time to do 2. So I think, and I'm drawing a blank on the conductor's name. Was it? I
thought I had it in my notes, but I don't.
Yeah, I totally drew a blank on his name. But yeah, he basically just took it's music based on John Williams. So, but it's again, as a kid, I knew it sounded a little different, but it was still the Superman theme, which was still awesome. So, I was okay with that.
Oh yeah, you're just like, yeah, Superman. Like, I'll share a beautiful moment. My little boy is 2, and one of his favorite cartoons to watch is the 75th anniversary of Superman. And as soon as that Williams music kicks in with the higher part, like he just throws one arm up in the air. Mm-hmm. He's like, Superman. Like,
that's it.
Yes.
Yeah, they know that's the theme. Well, it's kind of like the James Bond theme. You don't change the James Bond theme.
No.
It's Star Wars, it's Indiana Jones, it's the Pink Panther. There are iconic themes associated with these characters. That's the Superman theme. So, but that, again, that's a whole other Man of Steel discussion. Ken Thorne, that's who the Ken Thorne adapted John Williams' music for it. So, for Superman 2. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, but he didn't do a bad job. Just like
I thought he did a good job.
Like later on, we can discuss if we want to touch on it real quick. John Ottman adapting Williams' score for Superman Returns, I thought was a great job.
Yeah, I thought they both did fantastic. Those are two Superman 2 soundtrack, and I have the vinyl version with the etched S Shield holographic images on the vinyl. So as you're playing it, like lights, it's pretty cool. That's one of my favorite soundtracks. I love it. Superman Returns, Ottman score, I thought is brilliant. I thought it was just such a nice return to that world. No, I'm totally fine with it. It's that theme. It's that iconic theme. It's timeless. It's Williams, and again, of all the Williams soundtracks, and as I mentioned, I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan, but Superman the movie is my favorite soundtrack. So that theme, you can just give it to me any way, I'll take it.
That's opening a whole nother discussion about. I always joke with my wife, like, if there was one composer that like wrote the score to my life, it would be Williams.
Oh yeah, well, and again, just to throw this out, if anybody's Williams fans, definitely check out. Well, another podcast we like is the IndieCast, and they're Laird Malamed and Ron Longo are going through the entire John Williams catalog on John Williams specials on the IndieCast. So they're going through not just the Indiana Jones stuff, although they're doing that now in the lead up to Indiana Jones 5. Not that this is the Indiana Jones podcast, but they're going back through. They've done Superman. They've done his, Lost in Space TV work. They've done, oh man, everything. All of his the Spielberg collaborations that he's done. So yeah, if you're a John Williams fan, check it out there because they break down like all of his stuff. But anyway, but we digress. This is the Superman talk, and
believe me,
and Williams' score is the best thing.
One of the biggest things, and we're gonna I think we might end up balancing between the two cuts, just kind of comparing because there's a lot here. I have 2 pages of notes on each film, where I was looking. But there are some shots where watching them now that was shot by Lester. There's a different style aesthetic. And one of the shots I actually really liked, the idea of the shot, is you kind of see more of Zod's insurgents in the Lester cut. You see him come in with Nan and Ursa and grab a crystal, and they break it. And when that happens, like the rings drop down, and then we go into the council scene. And I thought that was cool. We were able to get a little bit more of Krypton backstory, maybe what it was that Zod actually did.
Yeah, because like the proper cut, the feature is. You do have that montage of moments from the first film over the credits, but yeah, you do have that sort of little teaser sequence. It kind of reminds me of like the James Bond films where you have that little, that little teaser adventure at the beginning, or the Indiana Jones films where you have that little adventure at the beginning. So I always kind of like that. You got a little bit more of the Krypton story in that, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it does have a different look. I will say that. That's something that always stood out to me, but it never was that jarring that it was like, oh, what happened here? But it does have, it's like maybe a brighter look. I don't even know how to describe it. I'm sure film buff would be able to describe it better.
It's a little bit flatter in the way that it's shot. There's not as much depth. The lighting is different. Of course, I didn't look this up if they changed cinematographers or kept the same one, but the lighting seems a little different. Just the staging.
Yeah, it's was it Jeff? Boy, and I'm going back here, but I think it was Jeffrey Unsworth was the cinematographer. I'm just double checking now, but I think if I remember right, I think it was Jeffrey Unsworth, and I think the first movie, Jeffrey Unsworth, and the first movie is dedicated to him because I believe he passed away like right after the first movie came out. Yeah, he died on October 28th, 1978. So he died. The movie premiered December of 1978. So the film is dedicated to him. But yeah, so there is that different look to it. But again, as a kid, you don't know that. Something looks a little different, but it's Superman, so you're like, oh, it's a movie. I don't get,
Yeah.
But as an adult, you can go back and pick through it like it's the Zapruder film and go, okay, that particular few frames is Donner, this particular few frames is Lester.
And there's some frames that you don't realize, but when you become accustomed to watching one and then you put in the other, you do notice. And as a person who loves film and looks at it and studies shots, you can tell. I mean, it doesn't always hurt in the differences between the two. But one thing I noticed that was really interesting is in some of the Lester scenes, Zod's suit has red in it.
I don't know if I ever picked that up before.
His it's in his boots and in his the edges of his suit, because I have a Zod collectible that has red and I'm like, why is there red? And then when I was watching them back to back, there's little hints of red in his suit, and I was like, I wonder if the original suit was damaged, or why did they go back and do this? But it's subtle, and it's only in a couple of shots. And there's even when they land on Earth is when you can tell it. And there's a couple of shots of Zod before and after where you can you see it, and then it's gone, and then it's back, and then it's gone, because they're cutting between the two.
Yeah,
and it's just a very interesting thing to pick up on.
Yeah, now that we've all seen it a million times and we go back through, especially with home video and giant TV screens and Blu-ray. I mean, Blu-ray really makes, now you can really get into the nitty-gritty. You can see the makeup and everything. And just even their makeup, on the villains is different from movie to movie. And, like we said, now that I look back on it, Margot Kidder looks really different from scene to scene. Just, even the hair, too. I think the wig that she has on. Because I think her hair, I think she had either cut her hair or something by the time they came back to film, so she had to have if I'm remembering this correctly, had to have the lowest wig on to match, and it just looks wildly different. To somebody, if somebody just popped the movie in and watched it, they're probably not going to notice all these different things. But those of us that have seen it 150 times, we're going to pick up on all those little subtle differences. But again, I don't think it takes away from the film itself, because again, we love those characters. So we're going to follow them around, and we're going to follow the story.
We do love the characters, and that's why we can come back and watch these movies, like you said, over and over and over. Some of the highlights and the differences between the two cuts. One thing that I really like in the Richard Donner cut that didn't make it into the Lester cut was when it's a screen test with Christopher and Margot, and it's when she discovers and finds out that he is Superman, and she pulls a gun and shoots him, and the gun was actually Blink's. I really like that compared to in the Lester cut where he trips and falls in the fire.
Yeah. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you can get into it, the whole trip and fall in the fire thing. Was it psychological? Was it he wanted her to know? Because Superman's not supposed to trip. Even as Clark, I don't think he would make that bumbling of a choice that would cause him to fall towards the fire and everything. So, I don't know. I really like the gun because it also tells you that shooting Superman with a blank compared to shooting him with a real bullet doesn't feel any different to him.
Yeah. That's such a strange scene too, because strange scenes you're discussing too, because the issue I have with the gun thing, and I know Mankiewicz has, that was from him, and that was one thing that they loved, and it was what they used in the casting choices, when they were auditioning roles, which is why you have that. They use the screen test like you mentioned in there, but to me in that instance, couldn't Clark Kent as Superman, couldn't he see that there are no bullets in the gun? You can make that argument too. So it's one of those things where you have to go back in time. You have to go back to 1978 or 77, whenever the shoot. That's very much from the comic books. That's very reminiscent of the comic books. That type of play between Lois and Clark, she's always trying to get him to reveal his identity. There's always some little weird thing that comes up. So that's really from that world of comic books. So I've kind of got an issue, with both scenes. You referenced though, whenever he stumbles and falls into the fire in the Lester version, they make a reference. They make a reference that in the script. She says, "Well, maybe maybe you didn't know. Maybe your head didn't want to, but your heart wanted to, or something like that." I forget the exact dialogue of it. Maybe you wanted to with your heart, or something like that. Maybe he wanted to tell her, and that was just his way of doing it. Who knows? Again, that gets in a whole psychological aspect of Superman 2. Did he want to tell her, but knew he couldn't tell her because of all the problems in the first movie? You can't interfere with human history. You can't love a human being, which is, again, something that plays into Superman 2. So, it's just very strange. What I do like the scene in Niagara Falls where she jumps into the water,
yes.
where she jumps into the falls. And he does that whole thing, where he saves her as Clark Kent. So we do have that because it's the Lester version. So for that, I'm kind of grateful that we do have that really great scene where she's in the water. And there's a very screwball 30s comedy feel to it, with him kind of doing a stumbling Cary Grant kind of thing with it. So I do love that aspect of it.
I just think when she's in the water and she's like, Clark, you're not. He's like, what, Lois?
You're who I thought was Superman.
And he's just like, it would have been funny later. She's like, wait a minute, you let me go through that water. She never has that moment. Why didn't you do anything then?
Right. Well, and then he does the little push up with the glasses thing. Where he pushes his glasses up on his nose. Look, Christopher Reeve's performance in both films, and in fact, all the films, you could, run down Superman 3 and 4 as much as you want. It still has Christopher Reeve as Superman. His performance in all of them is unbelievable. That's why I think nobody can get near those films. And no matter who is Superman these days, you already peaked with Christopher Reeve. The bar was set so high with that. You're never going to achieve it. The best you could do is second place. So as you go through these movies, you look at that, but man, he's just amazing in that. And again, that's of that era, the 70s comic books, stumbling Clark Kent, bumbling nerd, Superman. That's changed over the years, but at that time, that's what it was. That was a perfect reflection of the comic books.
You're talking about Superman 4, and we won't go into it too much, but there are some great scenes that he does in Superman 4. And I feel bad for Chris in Superman 4 because he had an idea for a film that mattered, and they changed it, they tweaked it, they cut it, and, listeners may not know that they had enough footage. They were going to try to assemble a Superman 5 from the footage of Superman 4 instead of just giving us one movie. They wanted to try to do two out of it when it really should have just been a one solid movie. But the one thing in Superman 4 that I like was where he has he's selling the farm. His mother's passed away, and you see him, Clark, on the farm, and how he's dealing with that. And I think that was something that was really powerful that gets kind of shoved under the rug. And I also like the idea that there was a character, an attractive woman, who was actually attracted to Clark. I think that's another funny storyline about, because everyone always kind of it's Clark, and especially in those films, the idea of someone who's actually genuinely interested in Clark, and then you have the whole where they're trying to date Clark and Superman at the same time.
Yeah. Great scene. Another great scene. Yeah. Where he's bouncing back and forth and flying out the window and coming back as Clark. That had gone to canon. There was a whole distribution thing. That company went defunct, and they cut 40 minutes out of the film.
Yep.
And the thing is, Tom Mankiewicz, the screenwriter on 1 and 2, he even told Christopher Reeve, don't take on nuclear war, that aspect. Don't get into this stuff, because technically Superman can handle any problem.
Yes.
There's nothing. He could solve world hunger. He could bring about world peace. He could do all these things. You don't get into that, because then you have to explain why he doesn't do it. And I think Christopher Reeve, once they got into it, realized, okay, yeah, this kind of got into a weird area here. That's why you have them just kind of going after aliens and, doomsday and like these threats and creatures from outer space. You get into the sci-fi realm and things like that, because he is so powerful. He is all powerful. So you don't want to get into that. But, like you said, that movie definitely has its moments. They're in there. They're fun to watch. So
it was another one as a child I watched a lot, because I'm guessing the rights to show it on cable was really cheap, because I feel like it was on all the time. But
yeah.
I remember my brother and I, it was on at our grandparents' house and playing in the basement, and watching it. So, and honestly, like, it took me a while that I don't really have a memory of watching Superman 3 as a child. I probably did, but it doesn't stick out. That took me till I was in my later teens, when they had the proper release of all the films on DVD, that I was able to get a hold of Superman 3 and watch it. But I had seen Superman 4 just because it seemed like it was always on TV. That's just an interesting fact. It's like, out of all the Superman films, the one I've seen the least actually is Superman 3, which has its high points, and that's another discussion for another day.
Yeah, and I like that film. I think that's a great film. It's the whole Richard Pryor thing gets a little weird too. And again, it's of that era. He was one of the biggest box office stars on the planet. So that explains. And he said he loved Superman. So the producers were like, get Richard Pryor. It was a business decision to put him in that. But it's got Lana Lang. It's got that love story between Lana and Clark, and there are some great moments in that film. And it was supposed to be Brainiac. That was originally, I talked to Ellie Salkind, and he had some ideas, and they wanted to bring Brainiac in and Mr. Mixer's-Pitalik and all these different things. And, it was video games, and Atari was big at the time, the Atari 2600, and you hear the little Pac-Man sound effects in it. And again, it's a product of that time. That's what was big. They were like, oh, computers and video games are big. Let's do something. Okay. And we look back on it now and go, really? But in 1983, yeah, that was awesome.
It is one of those things a lot of times when you're making a movie, when you do something and you try to make it as relevant as possible, that sometimes it's relevant for the time, but it doesn't age as well.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where it kind of falls. But I mean, computers, hello, Brainiac. That's why I'm really hoping that Brainiac emerges somewhere here soon, because I feel like Brainiac is like the scariest villain, in the sense that we rely on computers so much and do so much with machines, that having an alien machine that can basically cripple us in a second is terrifying.
Well, they've done it on television, and I don't know why they can't do it in movies, because they did it on Smallville amazingly. James Marsters, I had, again, talking about Comic Book Central, talked to him about that role.
Yep.
He loved that role. And we talked about that. And they did so much with it. There were so much variations to do with him. And they're doing it on Supergirl. They're bringing in all these different comic book elements. You don't need Lex Luthor. Look at the movies. How many movies do we have? 4 Christopher Reeve movies, Brandon Routh, and then 2 Cavill movies, right?
Yep.
So 7. We've got like 7 feature films. How in how many of those is Lex Luthor a villain?
The best question is how many is he not? And the answer is 2.
Yeah, 2. I love Lex Luthor, but man, he doesn't have to be in every one. And it's just like you said, Brainiac. That's amazing fodder for a feature film. And if they can, and I know we're digressing it, but I love Superman Returns. I love Brandon Routh. I think that was a great reintroduction of the Donner mythos. Again, tying it in with 2, because Returns is basically a sequel to 2. It was such a amazing way to bring that back. Yeah, it has its problem. Yeah, it has its flaws. Well, again, you brought Lex Luthor into it, but they set that up at the end of the movie to have sort of this new Krypton or whatever floating in outer space.
And that's
when he takes the thing.
They were supposed to take it was like a new Krypton.
That was it, and they were going to bring Brainiac in, and they were going to have this huge throwdown epic battles, and it's just like, Warner Brothers panicked because it didn't make as much money as whatever was out at the time on Spider-Man or whatever. And, it made a bunch of money, but it didn't make enough money. And so we reboot the whole thing. Don't throw it all out. You can't stop rebooting.
In my mindset, I always pretend like Superman Returns and Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern exist in the same universe together.
Yeah,
just so they have both of those films have
home
that they can touch with, because like before
they have a safe place in that universe. Yeah,
before they decided to reboot it, like just for fun, a friend and I discussed like, well, if they wanted to do this and this story, like how could they do it? And like I had a whole idea of like where to take Brandon Routh's Superman to connect it back to make a sequel and spawn into the Justice League, and of course none of that ever they went a different direction, but.
Yeah. No, it was there. They laid the template. They brought it back. Superman did return. Again, it's got its issues. It is slavishly devoted to the Donner era. Maybe a little too much. It's not non-salvageable to they could have done a sequel and continued on, because I remember absolutely.
The sequel was announced. It was going to be called Man of Steel. It was going to have that terminology in there because of the Dark Knight, and I just kept waiting and like tried to follow any news, and then eventually it was like, nope, not at all. And
I think they had to let Brandon Routh's contract run out or something. I think there was years, because he was signed at like X amount of years or something like that. So I think there was a whole issue of like allowing time for his contract to run out and all these different other issues coming in. Again, I think it's an amazing film. I love that they brought the theme back. I love that they brought the music back. I think right now, at least what it serves, and I've said this on the show on Comic Book Central, is that I think it serves as a nice bookend to the Donner era that we didn't necessarily get with 4.
Yeah.
4 was such a debacle that I think this kind of went like, you know what? Because even just to the last scene where he flies down and they do the Christopher Reeve, break the fourth wall, look at the camera fly by. It's almost like, okay, thank you for giving us that. I know we're not getting any more, but thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, hey, we're just talking Superman. It doesn't matter. I feel like Brandon didn't really have a chance to grow into his own as the character, because in some ways he was very held back by trying to be Christopher Reeve. And I feel bad for him, but I think he did a great job with what he was able to do and given. There's Superman Returns has a special place in my heart, and it's because, I always say I grew up at an interesting time for Superman because I was born in '85. We'll just throw that out there. So by the time I was born, I got the most of the Superman films already, on release, so they're on TV. I got the Superboy TV show, and then into Lois and Clark, and then the animated series. I'm getting Superman. I'm getting to enjoy this, and then I got Smallville started. But when Superman Returns came out, I finally could go see Superman on the big screen. It was my first chance to get to see Superman on the big screen, and it was back in. Even though like you had Smallville, it was like back in pop culture. Like, you could get like there was just so much more merchandising and like everyone was talking about it. There was the hype towards it. I remember the first teaser trailer for it. So, I went and saw that movie like 3 or 4 times in theaters. It was back when they had the IMAX 3D where the entire film wasn't in 3D. Just
Yeah, it was the
sections.
plane scene.
Yeah, the plane.
Yeah, it was a plane rescue scene. Yeah, I saw that too.
Running in corn, and then there was like one more towards the end.
Yeah.
So I mean, I have a special place for it. It does have some good stuff. One thing I really do like about it is I like the brightness. I like that it was shot bright and vibrant, and I would like to see more. It doesn't, for a contrast of universe, and we'll even interconnected DC universe. I think that even if you're trying to make a darker Superman, you need to. I think the film should be shot brighter. I think the film should still elect, even in its colors, just looking at the frames, the hope that Superman's supposed to create, no matter what he's dealing with himself, no matter what the situation is. Now, for a Batman film, I think you should shoot it darker because the character and everything is supposed to be darker. But you need that dichotomy between the two. You need to have, just on a visual point. But we really digress now.
No, but I mean, people need to look at this thing too and realize that when you're talking about Superman films and Batman films and the DC feature film universe, it's Warner Brothers. So you've got this studio, this conglomeration over you of executives who may or may not know much about comic book history and these characters. Sort of unlike the Marvel universe, where Marvel Studios was based on the people knowing these characters. They brought in people who knew all of these comic book characters, and it was Marvel's studio. They bankrolled it initially, with Iron Man. But Warner Brothers is sort of beholden to these executives. Now, in 2017, we're seeing, Jeff Johns and these folks brought in that know the comic books. And, on the TV series, you see, especially on The Flash and Supergirl and, the Berlantiverse, people that understand the characters. So now it's a different vibe. But when you're going back to 2006, it was, hey, comic book movies do well, and superhero movie, we have Superman, let's do this. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those decisions that might have been comic booky or comic book influence didn't necessarily go through. They were more business decisions that were made. It's just a tricky situation. Again, 2006 is a much different time than last year. 10 years, cut to 10 years later, whole different comic book universe, feature film wise.
It's interesting to me that the same studio the year before released Batman Begins, and with Batman they were like, well, we need to go back to and just redo it all, start again. And they didn't have as much problems, I think, as with getting another Batman movie from where that left off with Batman and Robin, because we have the story about Superman Lives and how that was pulled the plug.
Yeah,
but I just think it's
a great documentary, by the way. Have you seen the documentary?
Oh yeah, I bought the Blu-ray special edition because I wanted everything about that movie.
It's like a train wreck. You just can't look away. It's just so amazing to see. Yeah. If people haven't seen it, go check it out. It's a fun watch. We're going to
do an episode on it at some point. I want to do it with someone who watches it with the same amount of fervor that I do.
It's funny. I mean, it's just it's so amazing to see. And so many no pun intended, so many bullets dodged in that one. But again, that lays the basis for Superman Returns, because like all that baggage was brought into Superman Returns. Like, we spent all this money, and Bryan Singer was like, I didn't spend any money.
Exactly.
You guys spent money. I didn't spend a dime yet.
He got penaltied for that. And it just, to me though, it's just funny that they took one character that had a bad, they're kind of coming out of a bad, and decided just to strip it down, go back to the basics. And then the only thing they could get to work with Superman was to kind of pick up where it was left off, but like after 2, and just kind of like, well, we will forget 3 and 4, which seems like a more common practice now with all the reboots and stuff that we go through, where they're like, just kind of forget those films existed. We won't acknowledge them. It just seems like a very interesting choice in such a short period of time.
Well, and it was like they threw the baby out with the bathwater with that one. You just, don't do that. Just pick what worked. You had a lot of stuff in Superman Returns that worked. When you're coming out of, we're talking about Superman 2, when you're coming out of that, there are a lot of those elements that do work in that movie. So just tweak those elements. You don't have to throw the whole thing out. And that was what I was referring to, was the Warner Brothers decision of, obviously the creative team, they made the movie they wanted to make. Brandon Routh was ready to go. Kate Bosworth was ready to go. Bryan Singer was ready to go. They're all ready to go. And Warner Bros. Was like, no, put the brakes on. We need to redo the whole thing. And that's such an executive decision. That's such a suit accountant decision. That's definitely not a creative decision. And you have to look at this and go, can we take what worked? What's the character? And that's when you start bringing the people in that know the character. And it goes back to a line in Superman, the movie, when she says, who are you? And he says, a friend. Mm-hmm. And there's also another line at the very end of the film, and he's like, thank you, Superman. And he's, no, don't thank me, Warden. We're all part of the same team. And it's that, I'm a friend, I'm a buddy, I'm here to help, I'm here to fight for truth, justice, American way. And Lois Lane, you're going to end up fighting every elected official. And he's like, you don't mean that. He's so noble and, and maybe in some ways naive or something, but that's that character. That's the character that works. I think Brandon Routh kind of brought that spirit into it of just like, look, I'm here to help. I'm here. I'm a friend. I'm here to help. And they kind of, they're going a different way now, which is fine. I mean, they can do whatever they want. The new movies are wildly successful, but I miss friend Superman. I miss that guy.
With what you said, I think the biggest thing is, one, Man of Steel was not made to kick off the DCEU. Man of Steel was made to be Man of Steel. It was made in the vein of, we'll just do one character, like Chris Nolan was doing. It was made to be kind of this Chris Nolanized Superman. But then, because originally Green Lantern was supposed to kick off their cinematic universe, is what they were going to try to do, much like Iron Man, that movie didn't do so well. So they're like, well, we got Man of Steel. And so, but really, BVS was the one that kickstarted their universe, and they put so much into it to try to just catch up that we really needed another Superman film before that film. We needed, like you said, to see friend Superman, to see Superman being Superman. Like, even if, public opinion's against him, we need to actually see him full on doing his thing. And I mean, we could sit here and go back and forth, but about why they tried to do. But I agree with you.
No, I mean, I think you're right. It's like you have to establish, and it was kind of that thing like, we need Avengers. We need our own Avengers right away. And so let's do this. It doesn't necessarily work that way. That's not going to work for these characters. I think you're right. I think they needed to establish. Look, I'm sure if you ask Henry Cavill, he would have been like, yeah, I wish I could have had a couple of Superman movies under my belt.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Cavill is a great choice, and there are hints and there are shots of his Superman, but they haven't given him the script and the story to really do it. They haven't let him be Superman. Have you ever seen, I bet you have, but the Justice League War animated film?
I don't think I've seen that one.
It's based off.
I've seen a few Justice League anime. I don't think I've seen War yet.
That one's based off the first volume from the New 52 by Jim Lee and Jeff Johns. And I feel like that's a good, like, if you wanted to jump in and do a Justice League movie, that would have been a good way to approach it, because it's basically, there's an event, and like the Justice League characters, some of them know about each other, but they've never met. And in this event, which is the invasion of Darkseid, starts pulling them together. And they kind of form out of that. And I think that would have been a good jumping point to do a film where you could do your Justice League film, and it doesn't have to be super tight where they came together, but then you could go back and do, here's your Batman film, here's this. Just, you didn't have to rush it. I mean, I'm excited for Justice League. Yeah. I'm really excited for Aquaman, but that's a whole, we could talk Aquaman, because that movie, I'm pumped for.
But I mean, but think about it. I mean, you talk about this animated film and bring all these characters together. I mean, just think about what they have established. And that's why I always say, you don't have to throw everything out and redo everything. Okay. They did Man of Steel, right? Mm-hmm. So you got Superman. I think there were several Christopher Nolan Batman movies, right? Christian Bale.
3.
I think he kind of established himself as a character. So you got Batman there. Is there a Green Arrow?
Just TV.
Just TV. But why would that matter? That character exists. He exists in the DC universe. He's live action. He's Stephen Amell. You've already told 4 years at that point of his origin story. You don't need an origin story. Here's 4 seasons of it. Go knock yourself out. Do you have the Flash?
Yes. I mean,
Grant Gustin, you've told his origin story. You're not going to tell it any better. Take these characters and put them on the big screen. It's simple. It's done. Money's already spent. I don't get that.
Think about Michael Keaton as Batman. It's very well received. People love it. It wasn't an origin story, really. Like, the movie starts, he's Batman, and it's his story of coming out in the public.
Yeah.
And then we get a hint that his parents died, like in a flashback. That's our origin. There's no big, we don't get the training, we don't get like this huge backstory of how he came to be.
Yeah, they jump right in. Yeah, he's Batman.
And I think, be it good or bad, Batman Begins is what changed that, because it showed what a true origin story could be. Now everybody wants to tell their Begins story.
Yeah, but how many origin stories do we? Superman's Krypton blew up and he was sent to Earth and he was raised by the Kansian. We get it. Spider-Man was bitten by a radioactive spider, and with great power comes great responsibility, and Uncle Ben died. We get it. We know this stuff. I don't have to keep seeing James Bond. I get it. I know where Indiana Jones comes from. Stop telling me origins. I'm telling you had Superman, you had Batman, you had the Flash, you had Green Arrow, you have Ryan Reynolds as Green Lantern. What more do you want? I mean, that's why I say these executive decisions and the TV decisions. Well, it's a TV universe. You even mention it. Well, there's a TV version. Well, it's a version.
I like that.
You know what I'm saying?
That they kept it separate.
We're 2 different worlds on this, my friend, because I love the Marvel universe. We're like, it's all connected. I don't care if I'm watching Netflix or a feature film or Ant-Man or whatever. He's going to show up wherever he wants.
I like it because the DC movies take forever, and I think that puts a lot of hindrance on what they're trying to do on television, because if you think about all the characters they've covered and everything they've laid the groundwork, if the movies tried to tie in and do stuff, like, it would take them, like, especially when they try to do bigger characters. Would I have liked to have seen them execute a more flawless Marvel strategy? Yes. But
Marvel's doing it. Marvel's doing you watch, I mean, literally you're sitting in a movie theater watching Captain America Winter Soldier, and 3 days later I'm watching it play out on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It doesn't miss a beat.
That's because they planned it together.
Right. Well, okay, but
it out.
Well, that's the thing. But some executives came in and said, "We need the Avengers, make Justice League," and they're like, "Oh, well, we got to figure out a Wonder." And now they're all scrambling. And then how many Flash directors have they gone through? I mean, talk about chaos. Right. Yeah, I mean, okay, how many Wonder Woman directors did they go through? How many? And now Ben Affleck's like, Batman, and I'm not directing it. And there's all this. Okay. You've already got these characters. Now, I could sound like a broken record here, but it's to me, it's like, just take these characters that you've already established. If you just made a Justice League movie, Henry Cavill, Superman, Christian Bale as Batman, you bring Ryan Reynolds in, you bring Grant Gustin, Stephen Amell, you introduce Wonder Woman. It to me, it was just a no-brainer. You got this stuff already established, and make it fun, make it interesting, humorous, have some humor in it, have some comic relief. Have Mr. Mxyzptlk pop up and for like a cameo or something, and Superman yells at him to get back to his dimension, or something. It just have some fun with it, but it just like it seems like it's being pulled in so many different directions. Look, I'll watch him, but I watch Batman v Superman, and all of it's like Flash pops up, and he's like, Lois Lane something. I'm like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's.
I don't know what that is. Why are you, and then it's like, hey, here's
an idea that they'll say it however they want, but that whole nightmare scene and Flash popping up and everything was going to tie into the Justice League movie they were originally going to make. Because originally it was supposed to be Justice League Part 2, but then they decided just to make one Justice League movie first.
Again, it's the chaos.
That's what I'm saying. Like, no, they didn't have a plan. That's why I'm glad that they didn't decide to tie the TV together with the movies, is because the TV had a plan. Like, they have they know what they're doing.
Yeah, because one guy's running it.
Yeah.
Kevin Feige over at Marvel is running it. There's a million different people in DC that are. Look, here's the thing. You get me started on this, I'll never stop.
No, you're fine.
I know we're so far up Superman 2 topic, but
it's okay.
I'm so passionate about this because it's like I love these characters. I told you Superman's my favorite character.
Me too.
And I want to see it done right. And every time I'm like, don't snap his neck. Don't snap his neck. He snapped his neck. Or like, oh, don't do this. Oh, he did this. I just. I almost have to divorce myself from that world at this point and just go, well, that's that. I'm going to go watch Superman 2. You're like and enjoy it and enjoy Christopher Reeve.
My brother-in-law and I, we watched Doctor Strange the other night. And when we watched it, we talked about, Marvel's a producer-driven studio with Kevin Feige.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers has tried to be all right, we're going to have this group like as a producer type, and we're going to give creative control to the directors. But so far, it works in theory, but they haven't been able to do it. And that's why they're eventually, if you watch, with Jeff Johns getting more power and coming back around, they're slowly starting to get into that producer-driven, because it's not working the way they had this plan to. All right, so we'll jump back to Superman 2 real quick. We'll hit some high points.
Yeah, sorry. Look, you get me started on that stuff. I can go on for hours, but yeah, it's just so fine. The first crazy.
I did a guest spot on the Always Hold On to Smallville podcast, and I talked with the guy who runs that. His name's Zach, and our first conversation was 3 hours long of just talking. And my wife's like, "Are you still on?" I'm like, "Yes."
Shut up, nerd.
She's like,
go outside and do something. Get some sun.
She knows I can talk Superman all day. And so we'll jump back over here. One thing I thought about, I wanted to ask you, because you have a little bit more knowledge and stuff than I do, is the Lois Lane death. Was that in the original script, or was that put in Superman 1 when they decided to attach the time reversal at the end?
I don't know if we've ever gotten a definitive answer on that. Because I've kind of looked into this, and again, there's, huge Superman movie historians out there, that might know this, but cause that's an amazing question, because it's like she wasn't supposed to, I believe that was in the original version, because he throws one missile into space and it cracks the Phantom Zone, but one missile does hit and causes the earthquake and does the whole thing. I don't know if there's a definitive answer on that though,
because one of my favorite scenes that gives me chills of all time is when she dies and he does the no, and then he screams and flies up. That just saying that right now just gives me chills. And the only thing I don't like about that scene is when he's flying up and they have that part where Jor-El speaks to him and he stops. I just kind of wish it would have been Jor-El talking and him just keep flying, and he's ignoring his dad and he starts to spin the earth back. That's just from a direct.
Well, and he ultimately does ignore his father. I mean, that's the whole thing, is that he remembers the fact that he couldn't save Jonathan Kent. He recalled, like, look, I get this. I get this greater picture here, but I'm here on Earth and I've got these human emotions and I am Clark Kent. And I couldn't save him. I couldn't do anything about it. I can do something about this. I'm ignoring this ghost from the past, from this long dead planet, and I'm living my life. But I love that moment. I love that moment of reflection where he does stop, and he's kind of torn between these two worlds for a second, and then he realizes, no, I'm Clark Kent. I live here. I'm doing something about this. Now, again, it's if that movie were made today, that would be tricky, because it's one of those things. What do they call it? Deus ex machina.
Yes.
However, it's where here's all this crazy stuff that happens, and we're going to undo it with one little thing. It's like it drives you nuts when you see it played out now. But again, it goes back to what I said before: of if you make me care about those characters, you can do what you want with them, and I'll follow you. Mm-hmm. If we didn't care about Lois and Clark, Margot Kidder, and Christopher Reeve, and he does that and turns the world back and saves her, we'd be like, oh, give me a break. That's ridiculous. but we care about those characters, and we're like, oh, he brought her to life. Thank goodness that we get to see her again. So in that respect, I'm okay. But I think if you had made that movie today with that ending, oh boy, I think it would be ripped to shreds.
And I agree. Jumping back, I often say, if Green Lantern had come out in 2007, it would have been a hit. Like, it would have been like the year after Superman Returns, it would have been a huge hit. But because it came out after The Dark Knight, it was DC's next film. That changed the standard, and by the time that came out, we'd already had Marvel in its mode that it just wasn't what people were looking for.
Yeah.
Now here's the big question.
Well, and speaking about Green Lantern, I mean, you brought it up. It's like I really don't get the hate on that film. Do you?
I don't either. I mean, there's things I wish they would have done differently.
Yeah.
But all in all, did I enjoy it? Yes.
Yeah.
Did I love Mark Strong as Sinestro? Yes.
Yeah.
They set up to bring in Sinestro? Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
There have been worse films that have gotten sequels.
Yeah, that is very true.
I mean, you could have done the sequel and put it just Sinestro and Hal on Earth, so you wouldn't have to worry so much about the CG of Oa if you're looking at budgetary restraints. So
yeah, I thought Reynolds was a great Green Lantern. I thought he was pretty cool. But anyway, again, we digress. But it's what could have been.
The big question here, we've talked about it and we've talking all over the place, which is great because I love talking Superman, is which cut of Superman 2 do you prefer to watch? If you're going to sit down and watch Superman 2, which cut?
the proper feature. Yeah, I mean, it's again, I'm most of everything I do is based on nostalgia. Mm-hmm. There's just something, do I love the tweaks that George Lucas made with the original Star Wars? Look, I that was the question I asked to Mark Hamill too. Is like, did Han shoot first? He says, of course he did. So I hate that one. But it was on the other day. I was kind of watching it, and there's like all these little tweaks and things, and some of the effects, and it does dress it up a little bit. And I kind of like those, the updated effects in Star Wars. Mm-hmm. When they add little things. But I love the original. I like when all the X-wings look exactly the same and they fly the exact same pattern because they're all sitting on a gable or whatever apparatus that is or whatever. I like that. I'm a purist. So Superman 2, the Lester cut, that's what was released in the theaters. The summer of '81, we had a second run theater. It was a Buck Theater, the Buck Theater, the Bantam, 4 theaters.
I missed those.
Oh, I mean, it just we got one in Ohio. We got one in Ohio, Cinemark.
Yeah.
Where what are they, like $2, $2.25?
Yeah.
And we'll go. Yeah. So we'll go see cheap movies there at second run. But we had this, and the summer of '81, the tail end, August or whatever. By the time we got to there, it was Raiders of the Lost Ark was in theater 1 and Superman 2 was in theater 2, and we would just go in and run from one theater every weekend. So we just watched Raiders and Superman 2, and our parents thought we were like, "Oh, you're not going to. Where are you really going?" We're like, "No, we're going to see Raiders again. We're going to see Superman 2 again." That's all we did all summer. So we watched that movie over and over and over again, committed it to memory. We'd be the only ones in the theater, and we're just, my friends and I are just sitting there watching it. So, that's the movie I fell in love with as a kid. That's the movie I love. It's cool seeing these different versions, and oh, look, there's an extra scene. Oh, there's this cool scene. Oh, look, there's the Arctic Patrol where they're taking the the Kryptonian villains away, and that's a whole other discussion too. Like about killing the
I was going to bring that up because you and I started talking about that online.
Dude, I like that that's out there. Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and explain that to the listeners who aren't aware of it, what that is?
Oh, the Arctic Patrol scene?
Yes.
Well, and again, it's I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's not in the Donner cut.
No, it's not
because
it's just
right because they do the reversal of time and they end up get sucked right back in the Phantom Zone into the thing. So that's where they end up in the Donner cut. But on the ABC version or in the deleted scenes, I think on the Donner cut, depending on which disc you have in or whatever. Christopher Reeve, he he takes their powers away at the end of the movie. And so, and that's always the question. People are like, well, Henry Cavill killed Zod in Man of Steel. Christopher Reeve killed. No, he didn't. Look, and here's another thing. If you want to get me started on this, I'll debate anybody, anytime, anywhere, on any turf about this. Christopher Reeve does not kill the Kryptonian villains. Depending on which version you watch, if you watch the proper feature, he takes their powers away. Non falls into this chasm, which when you see the puff of smoke that comes up, it doesn't look like they fall that far.
Right. It
looks like they hit something pretty near below them. It's not like, they fall in this never-ending chasm. And then, Zod, he picks Zod up and flings him into the same chasm, and then Lois Lane punches Ursa, and she falls into the same thing, which I don't know how she does it, because I think she broke her hand earlier in the film. But anyway, I digress. I think that's something odd. But they end up in this chasm. So if you watch the feature, it's unclear what happens to them. He doesn't kill them. My assumption is that was some way to back in the Phantom Zone. That was a chasm to the Phantom Zone, and they end up going back into it. So there's that. If you watch the ABC extended cut, or if you watch the Donner cut, they get sucked back into the Phantom Zone because he reverses time. So there's that. If you watch the ABC extended cut, there's a scene where, Lex Luthor's trying, like, he realizes his time's up. He's going back to jail. So he starts negotiating with Superman. Hey, just bring me along. We'll do this, and I'll give you a percentage of this. Or he tries to say, hey, I can bring you up as nobody needs to know what happened here. I can bring you up as a boxer, which is odd because he calls him the Smallville Smasher or something like that. Which, how does he know he's from Smallville if he doesn't know he's from Clark Kent? But anyway, that's another whole thing.
Yep.
He takes him out, and as they're walking and he's trying to do this negotiation, he's being led off by the Arctic police in this Arctic paddy wagon, and the three villains are being taken in. So they're depowered and they're taken off to jail, just like ordinary criminals. So again, I don't care. And people are like, oh, that's not the real version. Okay, we'll go to the real version then. I still say they ended up in the Phantom Zone. Superman didn't kill. Period. End of sentence.
You're like, give me a couple of minutes. I'll just edit it into the version and boom.
You can pick whatever version.
The Stuber edit.
You can pick whatever version you want. Superman doesn't kill, but that's what happens to him. In that version, there's a version where they are taken off to jail, which is, I like that those kind of cool things are out there. But again, if I'm a purist, I'm going to sit down and watch the film. I'm going to watch the original feature.
And see, I totally understand that because of, like you said, your story of how you grew with it. For me, I like the Richard Donner cut a little bit more than the Lester cut. And a lot of it's because, like I said before, it's like I watched Superman 1 and 2 like seamlessly together. So I didn't really distinguish the differences. But, now that I'm older and I'm watching them, there's things just from a stylistic, the way it's shot, the way it's presented in the Donner cut that I do like more than the Lester cut. I mean, the Lester cut does have some more camp and humor and stuff to it. Some I don't mind. Some I think's a little like, huh? Like the infamous cellophane Superman symbol.
Well, you heard what Jack O'Halloran said when I asked him about that.
Yep.
That was Lester's BS, he said. Oh, he's
there's little things in the Lester film.
Scene.
Like when Clark's crossing the street and a car hits him and like he dents it. It's funny, but at the same time, I'm like,
200 people are looking on.
So there's nothing wrong with the Lester. I don't want anyone to think that it's a preference.
Yeah.
I mean, and just like Joe was talking about here, that sometimes you grow up with something and it's become such a part of you that, it might be bad or it might be good, but it's what you love because that's what you grew up with and that's what's part of who you are. I think it's fun.
And because there's so much good in it. There is a lot of good that's in it. I mean, you think about the Paris scene at the beginning. Yeah, I mean, okay, Paris, whatever. But that scene where he runs out of the Daily Planet and into the alley, that's like one of the best Superman reveals ever. Ever.
He does that whole scene is a Lester scene because it was written for time to set up the release of the Phantom Zone. And like we talked about him having to shoot so much original footage, it was just easier to create that scene than it would be for him to retweak any other scenes.
Right.
So I say to all you listeners, watch them both. They're great. I mean, there's little things. I mean, there's large things that we've discussed, some of the larger differences. in the scenes. There's little things here and there, little shots, re-angles of shots, alternate takes. Like, in one big thing in the Lester cut is we see Superman's mom, Lara, compared to, Marlon Brando, because they couldn't pay Brando more and everything. So in the Donner cut, we have shots of Brando being Jor-El.
So you get all that unused Brando footage that they shot. All those. Well, the thing is, if they had put any of that in, he gets a piece of the pie.
Exactly.
And they didn't want to share a piece of the pie with him. So they had all that stuff shot. It's not like they had to bring him back.
They could have
just put it in the film
and everything like that.
Once he got a percentage of the profits, and they didn't want to give him a dime. Oh, there was a whole lawsuit. He sued the producers, and so it was crazy. But yeah, you're right. You do get all that lost Donner footage that and I think that came about because Bryan Singer and Warner Brothers had settled with the Brando estate to use some of that footage
for Superman Returns.
For Superman Returns, right? So that, I think, opened the door to the Donner cut. If I'm getting my history right,
no, you're
I think,
right, because it was the Donner cut. If I remember correctly, it came out in 2006, but I think it came out shortly after Superman Returns came out on video, because I remember I was at Best Buy. It was
tied in with that.
And I was like,
the steel case thing. Yeah.
And I was just like, what is this? And I was reading, I was like, you know what? Superman fan, I'm rewatching all of them. Might as well just buy it. And then, it opened a whole new understanding to me. So before we leave and depart here, because as you can tell, faithful listeners, that Joe and I could probably talk all day, and I'm sure he's got other things to do. I got a couple quick questions for you. I want your take, since we talked about, how you kind of divorced yourself from like the Man of Steel and BVS and what's going on there.
And by the way, I say that, and I still watch them.
Oh, I agree. Like, there's still things in there I like.
Like, Man of Steel is 2/3 a good movie. It's the third I have problems with. But
my biggest problem,
I don't totally divorce myself. I'm a comic book nerd. I watch it. I own it. So it's
My biggest problem with Man of Steel is I wasn't a fan of the whole Codex subplot. I felt like that was very underdeveloped and just
the whole Kryptonian thing. Where they're all. They're all like set to do something on their planet. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
it's been a while since I've seen it. So
it was underdeveloped. I felt like hiding the Codex in Clark's cells, because nothing really ever came out of it. And the fact that, why wouldn't Zod want to? I don't know. Maybe I would have liked it better if Zod had been on Earth for years, secretly,
like a sleeper agent or something like that.
Why? I mean, yeah, you can suffer. Like, he talked about suffering. To adapt, but Zod adapted quickly because that was part of his genetic code. Why would you want to rebuild a planet where you're normal when you could live on a planet and rule as a god? Because wasn't that always Zod's thing, is he wanted to be like worshipped and praised? So why wouldn't you want to have your powers? But we're not going to go there.
I guess that's the psychological aspect of it. Does he want to rule, or does he want his people back? Does he want to be a ruler of his people and they respect him, or does he want to rule a planet of people that are weaker than him out of fear? I guess there's a whole psychological aspect to it. I love the Krypton stuff in that movie. I love the opening stuff and the Kellex and what are the battle beasts? I forget what they're called, but
I would have really liked more of that. Like, I wish the film had started with just Clark on the ship. And then when Jor-El talks to him and tells him the story, it fades in and we go back and see Krypton. And we got more Krypton. Because
that's good stuff.
I mean, I like the exploring Krypton. Like, would have liked more of it, than what we got. But here's my big question to you. What did you think of Tyler Hoechlin's Superman on Supergirl?
I love the show. Season 1 is unbelievable to me. I think season 2 took a hit just because you don't have Cat Grant on it. I think there's a lot of tweaks and changes of the characters, much less Jimmy Olsen in it.
Yeah, that's weird.
So I think it's almost like a different show in season 2. And then you bring Superman in, which I never thought we'd see, because there's always that thing, like you said, it's here's a movie universe, and here's a TV universe. You're never going to have the same on at the same time. So I was very surprised to see him on there. I thought he did a great job. I love his take on Clark Kent, I think, better. I think he plays a really cool Clark Kent. I like that version of it. The suit's a little strange to me. I don't know, the cape is... it looks so much different than Supergirl's, which looks more classic comic booky. This one is a little stranger. Look, I'm a big, red tights on the outside kind of guy. I'm thinking I'm a purist, so the whole, ultra blue thing. Anyway, but I thought those episodes with him in it were really good. I'd like to see more of him in that show. But again, there's a danger of bringing Superman into a show called Supergirl, because then you might lose the identity of the main character. So I get why it's limited. I thought it was cool. I love all the references and the conversations on the phone with Perry White and all those different things. So I liked it. I thought it was good. It's a good show.
See, it is a great show. I loved him as Superman. Like, I think from the first trailer where they had him and you saw him in the alley with the shirt rip, I felt those chills like I did as a kid watching, Lois and Clark every week and watching the Superman movies. Because all of a sudden, I love Supergirl. Don't get me wrong, but there was Superman for a second, my hero, and I think he did. Like you said, I loved his Clark. His Superman was really good.
Yeah.
I loved his Clark because I think sometimes Clark is the harder character to get. As far as my wife and I, we did a whole episode where we talked about the suits and things. I like the blue, and I like the symbol. I don't like the cape, and I don't like the boots.
Yeah, they're a little too bulky, I think.
But that's that's nitpicking and stuff. But I like the undersuit, and the one thing about the symbol I didn't like is if you really look at Christopher Reeve, George Reeves, Dean Cain, all their symbol that they have is the Superman symbol, but it's always slightly tweaked, even Brandon Routh's, so that when you see that particular symbol of Superman, you know what person it relates to. Even Supergirl, I love the way that with Supergirl they do the gold outlining of the insignia, but then the blue behind it. So
right.
When you see it, you're like, that's Supergirl symbol. Right. They didn't do anything on Smallville or with Tyler's suit to distinguish their actual emblem.
Yeah.
So,
but I think it's one of those things where, it's Superman. They're going to come up with whatever version they need to come up with. My only thinking, I like the actor. I think he's great. I think he's awesome. He seems normal sized with everybody else in the show, and that throws me off just a little bit because Christopher Reeve is like 6'4".
Yep. And I had it all written down. Cavill 6'1".
Okay.
Chris was 6'4". Brandon Routh is 6'3", 6'2".
Yeah.
Dean Cain was, I think 6 foot. I think Tyler's
he's probably the smallest. I think he's the shortest
6
one.
foot, right there. But yeah, I know where you're coming from exactly because I'm picky. I had a whole discussion about hair color in my last episode about how with comic book characters, because it's a visual art that you're bringing to life, how important. Like, to me, when I think Lois Lane, I think black hair. I don't think like Amy Adams red hair. Same thing with like Lana Lang, I think red hair. And they've changed that, and sometimes it works, but sometimes I'm like, you're confusing people. When they read this comic book and there's this redhead and it's Lana, and then all of a sudden you look on screen and it's redhead and it's Lois.
Yeah.
We talked about that, just picking apart things, and it's one of the few things that, sometimes I get it, but with certain characters, you want things to be perfect. Like even in Smallville, Erica was introduced as Lois as a blonde, but by season 10 she had black hair.
Yeah, I don't get too hung up over hair color. I'm okay with the redheaded Lois Lane. I would just wish they'd give her something to do. I'm more interested in who's the character? Why is she there? What is she doing? Is she doing anything? And even Amy Adams has come out in interviews and said, I wish I had something more to do. Like, that's huge. When an actress is coming out saying that, that's huge. That's a script problem. That's, you can put her in a wig. You can do whatever you want. You can change your hair color from black to brown to red to blonde, whatever. Give her something to do. Make her do something. And that's why I like on Smallville, Erica Durance. I thought that was one of the best.
She's my favorite
Lois version. She's amazing. She had stuff to do, and I know it's a TV series. I know that you get to flesh out characters a little more. Same with Lois and Clark. I love Terry Hatcher. But man, just give Amy Adams she's a pretty good actress. I think she's proven over the years she knows how to act. Give her something to do. And don't just make a video game and have us. Oh, again, anyway.
No. I've said this before on the podcast. I feel like Superman. Looking at Superman, he feels like he should be your big screen character, but it seems like he always has more success on the small screen, while Batman has his biggest successes on the big screen. I mean, you look at Smallville, 10 seasons, Lois and Clark, 4 seasons, Superboy, 4 seasons, and now Supergirl, we're in season 2, has a good success on television because you get to flesh out the character and do more with it, and then you do in the film. But you would think that Batman would be your character that would work better on television, but that's the problem. You hit the nail on the head, though. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make Superman Batman. You can't do that. That's the executive decision at Warner Brothers. They're trying to make Superman the same as Batman. Look, everybody I've talked to on Comic Book Central, and Ilya Salkind started it. He said, I asked him about Man of Steel, and he says, it's too Batmanish. It's too Batmanish. It's too dark. They're trying to make him like Batman. He's right. You can't do that. But they had the success with the Christopher Nolan films. And they're like, we'll just make a Superman version of that. You can't do that. And they haven't figured that out yet. And if you watch Batman v Superman, okay, yeah, I made a bunch of money. But, everybody I've talked to, they're like, they're not getting the character. It all looks the same. It looks like a giant throwdown video game where they're just smashing down buildings. You've got to get to the core of the character. And I think that's what they're doing on Supergirl. Is they're finding that essence of that character. You're seeing some of that, which is why I like that. I'm glad there's a version out there that exists that we can watch and go, oh yeah, that's our buddy. Yep. That's our buddy Superman. Exactly, and that was kind of where I was pulling with this. Is I agree with you. I want more. I want to see more of the character, but I don't want him to lessen Supergirl herself. Maybe like a 6-episode miniseries would be awesome. Something just small, just because I feel like it would be great to see him some more, and see what he can bring to the character. Because I feel like they set up, and I mean, slowly, in Supergirl, we see we saw young Lex. We got the official name of Lillian and Lionel for his parents. We've met Lena. There's little bits here and there. We've heard Perry White mentioned. Lois Lane's been mentioned. The universe is there. It just would be nice to kind of get something more Superman proper.
I think what they're doing is just giving you enough that, like you said, they don't overshadow the main character of Supergirl, but that it's an event. So you have these crossover episodes on Flash and Arrow. They just did Invasion where they're crossed over all 4 episodes, and it's going to be even bigger next year.
Good.
But each season should have its event. Like the Trickster, Mark Hamill coming in on The Flash. You don't want him in every episode. You don't want him in 5 times a year. But he comes in and makes these great performances, and you're like, man, that was an event. That was pretty cool. And it leaves you wanting more. So I think with Tyler coming in on Supergirl, I think, a 2-part episode every season. Not even the finale. Let the finale be Supergirl, but maybe, 1 episode or a 2-part episode each season. Make it an event. And so you kind of get a little mini Superman movie with our buddy Superman that where he's not snapping necks and destroying half of Metropolis in the process.
And
and by the way, we mentioned Superman 2. That was one thing I wanted to mention because that's where we started with all this. One of the things you look at, because people are like, oh, Christopher Reeve killed. No, he didn't kill. But look at the battle in Metropolis. What was the main thrust of that battle? Because Zod says he cares about these people.
he actually, like pets. Oh, I suppose so. He's running around trying to save. He saves the baby carriage. He saves, and he's saving all the people. And when it starts getting too out of hand, what does he do? He takes the battle. Yeah, he takes the battle up to the Fortress of Solitude. Why can't Henry Cavill Superman? Why can't Man of Steel? Why can't he take that battle into a desert? Why can't he take that battle anyway? That's just another thing I thought that I love about Superman 2 is that's the essence of the characters. Look, I got to protect these people. I'm not going to destroy half of Metropolis while I make my point. I'm going to take this battle far away. And that's what he did. So that's another reason I love Superman 2.
And, in that same logic, we'll just say in BVS, he did one thing that was really smart that I always said is he was taking Doomsday into space to fight him, and to throw it and to get rid of him. And if it wasn't for the people shot the nuclear missile, he would have defeated him right there. He just would have chucked him into space. Yeah, because I always said that's the best thing he should have done. But no, because of that, if you watch BVS, they make all these things like, oh, those docks are abandoned. There's nobody there right now. Because they're trying to okay, we get it. You don't want to see people in peril. And yeah, I mean, after he fought all the Kryptonians with the ship, he should have just taken Zod and taken him out to a desert, to the woods. Just grabbed him and taken him out somewhere away from all the people to where it was just the two of them. Because that is Superman. That is
Advantage Superman 2.
That's in all the comics and everything, is that he is going to protect the people first and try to move away. Well, Joe, I figure you and I could just keep going here, but we'll put a pin in it right here. I think we end on a good note. Thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Oh, no problem at all. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh no, I just like I said, I've talked to you before when I was first getting started, just for advice here and there, because I think you produce such a great, well quality show, and I just
thank you. You're very kind.
Oh, you're welcome. Like I said, it's a great show to listen to. I wanted to just find someone else who had a strong love for Superman, and I was listening to your Richard Donner episode, and I was like, okay, I'm going to ask him. Because this is an episode I've wanted to do, is just kind of talk with someone who'd watch both cuts. Most people I just want to watch one of them.
Well, it's fun. Yeah, it was fun talking with him about too, because I know, like I said, over the past couple of years, it's been trying to set up the interview with him, and at times he's okay talking about Superman. I know there were times he was tired of talking about Superman. So again, you just hit the right timing. Things worked out. He had some time, and we were able to chat about
Lethal Weapon. I wasn't. I love the Lethal Weapon movies. I love them to death. Literally, I could watch all four, then start them again. And then I've enjoyed the TV series. And when he said he likes it, I was like, okay, I don't feel bad for watching the TV series now.
It's Donner approved. So I just thought it was funny that because Jeff Johns used to be an assistant of his, and I was like, I had to ask him about that, and it's like he did ask him to come back and direct, and I didn't ask him specifically, but I'm going to guess it was an episode of Supergirl. But look, let's throw this out into the ether out there. Look, Jeff Johns has asked Richard Donner if he will come back and direct some television. He said no, but you talk about those event episodes. Could Jeff Johns convince Richard Donner to come back and direct a Superman-themed episode of Supergirl? How crazy would that be?
I have goosebumps. You just saying that.
Look, it's
because I wrote an article on the site about Glenn Winter and why'd I blank? David Nutter being two directors that have directed two different versions of Superman. Glenn Winter directed episodes of Smallville and directed the 2-episode crossover on Supergirl. David Nutter directed Superboy. Actually, he directed Superboy, both actors, and then he directed episodes of Smallville. And having two directors who've both been given the ability to direct Superman in two different versions, that's amazing, because you imagine Donner getting to direct this new version of Superman that we have on TV as well. He would join that ranks as being a multi-director. And, but I think that would just be, I think it'd be awesome. Like, he's got other Superman stories to tell. He's done some comics with Jeff Johns on it. I think it might be cathartic for him in some ways. I mean, I know it's been years, but you can tell that he's a Superman fan above and beyond being just the director of the film.
Oh, he said that on the show. Yeah, he said he was a huge Superman fan. He read the comic books and he knew the character inside. I mean, he opens up Superman the movie with the comic book, So, I mean, he makes those choices, but, that relationship is there. I'm hoping to have Jeff Johns on the show. I mean, still trying to work things out. I know his schedule is crazy busy, so it's one of those things where you just have to just keep at it. But that's certainly a question. If I get him on the show, I'm going to ask him. What did you ask him to direct, and can you continue to ask him to direct? Hopefully, a Superman episode of Supergirl. Look, the marketing alone of that episode, it would go through the roof.
Even if you just did a two-parter of Supergirl herself, because we didn't even touch on the Salkinds getting their hands on Supergirl, the movie. I mean, that's another discussion.
Yeah.
Would just be, Richard Donner come back and getting the chance to direct the characters. It would be great. I think he's one of my favorite directors. Like I said, I love the Lethal Weapon films. Those alone would make him one of my favorite directors, much less his other body of work.
Well, and Supergirl's in that universe too, because don't forget they've already dropped that there was an earthquake caused by Lex Luthor. The Fortress of Solitude is based on the Donner look of it. So all those things are out there. That's in that sort of Brandon Routh, Richard Donner, Bryan Singer, Christopher Reeve universe that's out there. All those things are kind of coming together. It's not the Man of Steel universe. They're closer toward the Donnerverse in there. So it would make sense if he brought him back in, because it's, it'd be like putting on an old pair of shoes.
Exactly. But Joe, like I said, thank you for being on here.
Thanks for having me.
So we could just keep going round and around trying to stop two Superman fans and two podcasters talking.
Two nerds. Can't stop two nerds.
I do appreciate you being on today and discussing this. We can find an episode. Maybe you'd be willing to come back on and talk some more.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm always up for Superman talk.
Is there anything that you'd like to plug or say for people to find Comic Book Central or anything?
Comic Book Central, you can find it. It's at comicbookcentral.net. That is the online hub of the show. So all the episodes, and over 160 some episodes now, 200 guests, they're out there in the archive. Facebook, it's facebook.com/Comic Book Central Network. There's an episode guide in the About section, so you can find your favorites. Twitter at ComicBookCTRL, and iTunes, it's out there. So, go check it out. Some crazy cool conversations. Mark Hamill's on a couple weeks ago, so we should talk about two nerds talking comic books, man. That guy will go every topic imaginable, and he's amazing on every topic. So that was another fun one.
He's one of those guests that he doesn't even have to touch on Star Wars and he's engaging. Just his Joker work and his trickster work, and how he did the trickster in the original Flash, because just being a comic book fan. I mean, not even getting into the Star Wars stuff, I find him just amazing to listen to.
Oh, he was talking about Riverdale. I mean, he was going on about Riverdale, how cool Jughead is on the show, and it was we're just one thing after another. And he's a comic book historian, and he's talking about all these different things, and, Peanuts and Charles Schultz, and man, King Kong, we talked about King Kong. we went everywhere. So if you haven't checked it out, by all means, that's one of my favorite conversations.
All right, Joe. Well, thank you. You have a good day, and remember, look up in the sky.